You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com. Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Thanks so much for joining me here on the program. And today we are talking about Donald Trump, convicted felon. Is he guilty? Rhinehold thinks so. He printed out 36 pages of evidence of why he's guilty. Attorney Abdul...
He's guilty because the court found him guilty.
Yeah, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz.
I did that in one line.
That's Abdul. You're not supposed to talk before your introduction.
Sorry.
Jeez. That's attorney and political commentator Abdul-Hakim Shabazz. He is also here, and we will talk a little bit more about Donald Trump right after these words. Here at the Chris Spangle Show, we are dedicated to helping you understand current events in a new and hopeful way. And it takes a lot of resources for our team to make that happen. So please consider supporting our work now via Patreon at supportcss.com so that we can continue to be a sane voice in a media landscape that no longer incentivizes it. Thanks especially to our $100 a month members, Vincent Peichel, Matthew Durbin, and Rhinehold. Thanks to all of our patrons for making this show a reality. Welcome back to the Chris Spangle Show. Thanks so much for joining us. Donald Trump has, six cases against him. That's more than like Snoop Dogg back in the 90s. So
that's when marijuana was still illegal.
Yeah, I know. So in case you've been living under a rock like me over the last few years, that's 4 criminal cases and 2 civil cases. The 2 civil ones have been settled. He owes E. Jean Carroll $83 million for defamation and the state of New York $454 million for civil fraud. And then there's the 4 criminal cases, 2 state cases. The one we'll be discussing today is the so-called hush money case. And there's also the Georgia election interference case. And then in the federal level, the January 6th case and the classified documents case. A whole lot of cases. So let's jump into it. What exactly happened? Let's start with Rhinehold, because Rhinehold I had to let him come on because Abdul, you have to understand. In the span of a week, the Mises Caucus died in the Libertarian Party, and then Donald Trump got convicted. I don't even know how he's out of the house. He's definitely out of lotion.
I'm not dehydrated.
You're not dehydrated.
I'm just staying hydrated.
So we'll set it up. You be our official newsman here. What is the hush money case about? What exactly happened?
So the hush money case is where there was a catch and kill scheme thought up by a National Enquirer. David Pecker was the guy in charge there.
You said Pecker. Everybody's been thinking that the whole time.
Exactly, yeah.
There were 2 Peckers in that case. So they came up with a scheme where they would put false stories into the newspaper that for his opponents, for Trump's opponents, and then put positive ones in for him, and then block any bad stuff that might be coming down the way. So they were on the lookout for bad stories. So they paid one out. They paid out a hush to a doorman who was...
Pull that a little closer to you.
Yeah, he said he had I forget what it was, a kid or something like that. There was some story that he had, but it was all false, but it was still, they went ahead and paid him for it. But when they got to the point of Stormy Daniels coming and looking...
It's the day after the Access Hollywood tapes.
Well, that's when
it comes out in the Access Hollywood tapes, he says, when you're a celebrity, they'll let you do it. The next day, Stormy Daniels pops up and says, I'm going to break my NDA. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but Stormy Daniels basically was paid $130,000 to keep her mouth shut because she.
But at this point, Pecker had chose not to do this because Pecker felt that doing so would be an in-kind contribution to the campaign.
Gotcha.
So he said, I'm not going to do it. So they called on Cohen to go and make the deal.
Right. Michael Cohen, who's his personal attorney, who was called the Fixer, essentially.
Right. Yeah. Super great guy. Everybody loves him. So he makes the deal with Stormy after there's a lot of pushback on whether or not they're going to do the deal or not, because the idea was from Trump that if they wait long enough and string her along long enough, then if it passes the point of the election, then he didn't care whether it came out or not, because if he won the election, it didn't matter. If he lost it, it didn't matter.
Because if you don't know, Stormy Daniels is a porn star. He had sex with Stormy Daniels while his wife was pregnant. Melania was pregnant with Barron.
And he said he didn't.
And he said he didn't.
He still says he doesn't.
Still says he doesn't.
In the court, he said he...
All 6 cases, he's not guilty, according to him.
It's all railroaded. So Cohen was told to go ahead and do this deal anyway, get it done, because it was decided it was going to be bad enough to do. So he took out a home equity loan on his house to pay her, and then was expecting to get reimbursed back.
Michael Cohen did.
Right. And there was documentation for this. There's the smoking gun letter that's out there that Weisselberg had signed. All this stuff. There's audio tapes and everything of all this
And the
stuff
checks
going
that
on.
Donald Trump signed.
Yeah, the checks. And that's where
Yeah,
you get
physical
into trouble.
evidence, as you lawyers like to call it.
$35,000 to $33,000 in each one.
Yeah.
Each check he signed.
Right.
And they're trying to say he was actually his attorney, so he was paying him proper legal fees. Obviously, he wasn't. That was the evidence that they were providing, was saying that no, there was just an overpayment for. And now it wasn't just that they paid him how much he paid Stormy Daniels. They also overpaid him because they knew that when he reported the income that he was getting, he had to report it falsely as well. So he had to take an income hit on it, tax hit on
So
it,
they
instead of an expense hit on it.
So they bonused him to basically lie.
Yeah.
Okay, that bit him in the butt. Okay, so the real crux of the matter, the 34 counts, is falsifying business records because this was not a legitimate business expense.
Right. It's a classic line. It's not the crime that gets you in trouble. It's the lie.
Sure.
Had they just paid Stormy Daniels, signed an NDA, and then Donald Trump said, hey, go give me $130 in cash, just give it to Cohen, they'd have been fine. But when you start filing falsified business records, that's when you get into trouble. And when you falsify business records in the commission of another possible offense, that's when you get into more trouble.
All right. Explain a business record to people who don't own a business and don't quite understand that piece. Because what does it matter what he's doing with his money, who he pays, who cares?
The thing is, in the state of New York, it's a crime to file false business records. It is. Because the thing is, what you have to understand is, I'm not going to say this. You have, when you're in business like you are, like I am, yeah, you keep records. You know, here's what my expenses, here's what my income is, here are my bank statements, here are my employee forms. There's all sorts of business records that you can keep. And so what they did was said, hey, we're going to put these down as business expenses. They filed false business records with the state of New York is what they did. And then that's how they ended up getting in trouble.
Gotcha. So like tax returns or what?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't necessarily tax returns in that specific case with the check stuff, but they're ledgers basically. So
Gotcha.
they need to get audited.
Yeah,
their
your
ledgers
profit and
have to
loan
match,
statement,
right?
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And the other part too is that not only did they try to obfuscate it that way, they paid her through an alternate, they set up an LLC, didn't they? A false LLC with fake names.
Okay, that's not a good plan.
No, it's not.
All right, now this is a misdemeanor, correct?
It's a Class E felony in the state of New York. And a Class E felony is like the lowest type of felony that you could possibly get. But what they did was the worst type of way that you could do it.
In what way?
And by filing false business records.
Okay.
So that's why it ends up getting bumped up from a misdemeanor to a felony. Right. Because in the commission of another offense, the prosecutor in New York has discretion to do this. And see, here's what people don't understand. This is all run by state law. This is not federal law. And different states have different rules.
Right.
New York has different rules than Connecticut, which has different rules, and Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana. You go across the country and you'll see tons of different types of rules for different types of things.
Sure. For
example, somebody told me that like Indiana, you can't do that. Yeah, because it's not under Indiana law. But New York, it's a different type of law.
Yeah.
And by the way, in New York, which is the financial capital of the universe, you got to make sure that they specialize in white collar crime because people do this stuff all the time.
Yeah, because in this specific incident, it's not an obscure crime. It's not super well, but you had some number the other day.
Oh, the 17510 that he is charged with was the felony version of falsifying business records. Somebody did a check and found out since 2015, I think there were like 9,800 charges filed for that. And when I was doing some research, I found there's law firms that out there that have actual page on their law website stating here's what happens if you're getting charged with falsifying business records. And there's a whole thing about it. So it's not an uncommon thing that happens.
Sure. But I was told on right-wing Twitter that it is.
It's a completely novel thing, yeah.
No, it's not.
Okay, so where does the federal election, the election piece of this come in? Because I had read somewhere when this first came out that these are misdemeanors, but in service of another crime, they become felonies, which is why this got bumped up. And so the crime that they never put into the affidavit or whatever you file, the actual indictment, excuse me, in the presence of an attorney and sometimes judge, that they never specified that crime, that they never had to prove that crime. They could just say, look, this was an election violation on the federal level, and he was trying to hide this from voters, and so therefore that's a crime, so this can be a felony.
Once again, this is all state law, and in the state of New York, it's an offense to... I'm trying to figure out how to say that. I'm trying to figure out how to put all this in English, because I've been watching this religiously. Matter of fact, I got to serve on a jury in a couple of weeks too.
Okay.
So that'll be fun.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
He'll be all 12 angry men.
Exactly. So in a nutshell, you have the one offense, which is the falsified business records. But if the business records are filed in the commission of another offense or to conceal another offense, that's when it bumps up to a felony. And the felony here was campaign finance stuff. Now, I think they have grounds for an appeal because the state offense was backed up by federal offense. And so the question is, can you state law to enforce a federal offense, which I think 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. But that's one of the things that could possibly appeal on. This whole thing about the judge was unfair and the jury,
we'll get to
all
that.
this other crap. Get the hell out of here.
If the FEC looks at it and doesn't take it up, then who cares? Is it really a crime if the FEC looks at this and they don't consider it a crime?
If I shoot you and the cops don't arrest me, did I murder you? I still committed a crime. Just haven't been prosecuted for it yet.
I don't know. Did you commit a crime, or do you have to be convicted of the crime? You're innocent until proven guilty.
If I shot you, I was probably getting a medal for public service. Just ask your wife.
But why does the state get to declare if the feds didn't say this was a crime? Who are they to determine? And it's not in their jurisdiction.
And that's why I say if there's going to be grounds for an appeal, that's possibly one of them.
Okay. You want to say something, Rhinehold?
The thing is with this is that the federal election is one of the 3 offenses that they've marked in their in the case as the alternate crime. The second one would be, what was it here? The tax fraud, because they paid Cohen to extra money in order to falsify his tax records, stating that he was getting this as income as when it was supposed to be.
And this is why Cohen was arrested and convicted, and then how did he get out early? Essentially,
he pled guilty because he said that they were threatening his wife and family with putting them in jail too. So he pled guilty, he went to jail, then he got out for COVID-related reasons or something like that. He got early release, and he got put back in, then he got back out again. So
okay. All right,
but so that's one of them. The other one is a New York statute, 17152.
We don't care.
I know.
Go ahead.
That's another campaign finance, not campaign finance, but a campaign election interference law that New York has. And they say that this was part of that campaign interference. This, in the jury instructions, they were told, which is the way New York works, is that the underlying crime, they did not have to specify what the underlying crime was that they believed was being committed, and they didn't have to agree on what the underlying crime was that they felt was being committed. They just had to believe that each individual juror had to believe that one of those was being committed, and that's why they did the falsification records for it. And it wasn't that it was being committed, it was that it was intended to be committed.
Gotcha. Okay, so we're in the legal weeds, but I think that's the point, Abdul.
Yeah.
And this is something that when I was your producer 20 years ago, that you always taught me. It's not what the caller on the radio says. It's not what back then we didn't have social media, but I think so many people look at things and they go, this just doesn't feel right. I'm one of those people. I'm looking at this suspiciously. Like, this seemed to have gone away. Wasn't this resurrected somehow? I read that somewhere.
No, but the thing was, there was an opportunity for other prosecutors to take a look at this and prosecute it. They didn't think they had the time, the energy, or the effort. They didn't think the witnesses were any good. And what Alvin Bragg did was Bragg just basically took his time and waited. Because once they just started, when Donald Trump was, 2018, when he was still president, they started looking at everything. And then it came through. And by the way, this whole thing about the statute of limitations in the state of New York, the statute of limitations toll, which basically means they stop if the person is in and out of the state all the time.
Right.
And Donald Trump was rarely in the state of New York between 2018 and 2020 because he was president. This whole thing about what this whole thing has showed me is that most of the public knows jack and squat about the legal system and how it works. Sure. And Jack just left town.
Some of the commentators, the law commentators who are attorneys on TV getting on there saying some things too that are like concerning as well, that just doesn't match up to what I've been reading when I look at that stuff. So
yeah,
in other words, the facts.
Yeah,
because the other thing too we didn't keep in mind. This is why I'm slowly, the media person in me loves to have cameras in the courtroom. The lawyer in me is I don't want people showboating and just get out of control.
It's what ruined Congress.
Yeah,
C-SPAN ruined Congress. It turned it into a platform for ostentatiousness.
My thing is, I would much rather have cameras in the course where we can all look at. We may not agree on what happened. At least we're all looking at the exact same thing.
I know, but it really wouldn't matter to the people who are going to. The thing about a lot of the right-wing media, especially, is that it doesn't really matter what the facts are or how the system works. We're going to tell the story we want to tell, amplify that, repeat it, and then make that reality for people until it becomes our reality. So it doesn't matter if there's video. There's video of January 6th, and it doesn't matter, right? Because they believe a totally different story. So
I have been arguing with people on Facebook and Twitter for the past couple of days about all this. Mm-hmm. And then I realized the best way to argue with these folks is don't get personal. Don't be snarky, just in your very calm voice. But are you sure about that? Why?
You turn into Socrates.
Yeah, just show me your evidence.
Yeah.
And I basically put out a thing the other day. Okay, if you think Donald Trump got railroaded, then I'll give you space for a 600-word essay on why you think he got railroaded. Only had one person take advantage of it, and that person was a criminal defense attorney.
Okay.
Everybody else.
What was their argument?
It's actually pretty detailed. He went through. I didn't agree with it, but he went through the thing about the jury instructions. About witnesses. For example, people say that Donald Trump was allowed to call witnesses. Yes, he was allowed to call witnesses. What about his FEC expert? You could have your expert, but your expert can't testify as what the law says and what it is, what it means. That's the judge and the jury's decision.
Right.
You can talk about, hey, when you file this, you can talk about the process, yeah, but you can't talk about the law. And the judge said, you can talk, but you can't do this. And then he didn't let it, then the guy decided not to testify. And by the way, Donald Trump's lawyers did a horrible job at lawyering.
I've heard this. Explain this to me. I've read that he basically could have done himself a service by going like 2 different avenues and creating some reasonable doubt, but didn't do that because he wouldn't let his lawyers say that he was, I had sex with her, but it was this or that. It's because he was prideful and said, I didn't have sex with her. You must make these arguments, that he ended up losing.
And when you say you didn't have sex with her, okay, that's your statement, right? Now I can use testimony from Stormy Daniels to impeach your testimony. And if you lie about that, what else are you lying about?
So what other things did his lawyers do that were wrong in your eyes?
Who was the one guy they brought up on the witness stand? I can't remember his name. Costello, who was god.
Oh yeah, he was terrible.
He was a horrible witness.
Who was he and what did he do?
He was like the overseer of the fixer type within the Trump organization. So he was the one that was the go-between some of the things going on with Weisselberg and Cohen and stuff like that.
And then also, I want to say, didn't they also bring up like one of his clerks who basically said, yeah, everything ledger, that's true.
Yeah, well, the prosecution brought that person up, and she said, I think it was a woman. She said he was always meticulous and knowing everything that went in and out of that ledger. He was never letting anybody else do that.
Donald Trump?
Yep.
Okay.
So that put into the mind of the jury that he's not going to get away with saying, oh, Weisselberg did all that stuff and I didn't know anything about it.
Gotcha. Okay, so what case did they make? What was Trump's defense?
Cohen was a liar.
Okay. What about, you have to call everybody a liar?
See, Cohen may have been a liar, but you still have documentation to back up his claim. Because the documents were the more important evidence than Michael Cohen was.
Sure.
I'll maintain that to my dying day, because obviously what the prosecution did, what actually made a lot of sense was, hey, we're going to bring up a witness who has problems being honest. Michael Cohen did this. You know what? Michael Cohen may be a liar. What is a liar? The documentation. That's Donald Trump's signature. That documents don't lie.
So it's the argument that we've made all along about Trump. It's like he keeps shooting himself in the foot and then blames other people, and then his audience buys it. Like, instead of just, maybe I blew the COVID thing. Maybe I was actually sick with COVID real bad.
The thing is, too, that Donald Trump has gotten away over the course of his career with so much stuff that this is just normal. For him, this is normal behavior.
Yeah.
Right. Until somebody puts their foot down. Or foot up his butt.
Yeah.
No, you can't do this anymore, Gabe Whitley. You do this stuff and you get away with it. And nobody does anything until you come across the wrong person. Yeah. And now you're going to pay for it.
Yeah. So if you were Trump's lawyers, what was the defense that you would have gone after?
I had a plea bargain.
Okay.
I had a plea bargain that's all down to misdemeanors.
Okay. I know you're not a lawyer, but you probably read a lot of commentary from people. What was the defense that the Trump campaign should have made?
They shouldn't have. They should have just agreed to the Stormy Daniels thing, because then they couldn't have. Then the prosecution would have been able to bring her up on the stand, and that was a big deal to do that. They shouldn't have put Costello on the stand, because Costello was a horrible witness. They also shouldn't have made statements inside of when they're doing the testifying that Trump was making them say. You could tell that they didn't want to say those things, because they would say things like, "The defendant says he didn't have sexual relations with her," but he wouldn't make the statement himself, because he knew if he did it, he could get in perjury. So there was a lot of things like that was going on, and one of the things they tried to do was during the jury instructions deliberations is they tried to get the judge to say the jury has to come back and say which underlying defense bumped it up to the felony, right? And the judge said that's not how we do things. That's just not how we do things. They said, no, we know that. They admitted, we know that's not how you do things. But we want you to make this exception because it's such a big deal. And then the prosecution said, why are we changing? We can't change the law just because he's who he is. And the judge said, no, we're going to do it the way we've always done it, what the precedent is, and that's how we go.
Yeah. Does he just not have good lawyers? Is he just out of options when it comes to lawyers? He's got too many cases, too much of a...
And doesn't like to pay them.
And part of it is, too, is he won't let them...
Be lawyers.
Because they'll say, they would, I'm sure any lawyer who got that case looked at it and said, just plea bargain and get it out of here. It's done. It's off the radar. Nobody knows about it. It's a misdemeanor. Who cares? He can't have that. So he has to...
So now you got felonies.
Ooh.
What's the scripture? Pride before the fall?
That's his big problem. That's the story of this week between the LP and between Donald Trump. It's pride just kills you every time.
The one person came out underneath their NDA and was attesting to the tapes where he was saying
the N-word.
Yeah, N-word on
yeah.
So.
Sorry, Abdul.
It is what it is.
So it's like that's more confirmation of that.
I'm sure none of us are shocked that Donald Trump may have said the N-word at some point.
But we talk about the appeal process, and one of the appeals they're going to try and get into. First, they're complaining that they're going to do sentencing on July 11th, right before the GOP convention. This is an outrage. This is election interference. His lawyers requested that date.
So let's.
And by the way, too, the thing, and usually the sentencing in New York takes place like 30 to 60 days after you're found guilty.
Yeah.
And so it's within the time frame. And by the way, here's another thing to keep in mind. There are lots of people who go to criminal court who also have lots of other stuff to do. They got jobs, they got families, but no, the judge says you better have your ass here, or you're going to jail.
Yeah.
Period. And Donald Trump is not above the law. He's not beneath the law. You're being treated just like everybody else.
But he doesn't think that. His supporters don't think that. And all right, I'll give you a chance to respond because to me, the timing of 6 court cases falling in the year of his reelection, especially this case, who was Melania pregnant with? The kid that's 7 foot tall now?
Baron Cohen.
That's how long ago this was, right? So I think if you're a Trump supporter, you look and go, isn't this all politically motivated? Isn't there a reason that all of these court cases are coming up in the year that
because of Donald Trump. That's why.
All right, explain yourself. Why?
It's that why. I doubt seriously that if the New York prosecutors spoke to the Georgia prosecutors. Now, I will say this. There probably were some conversations, hey, when do you plan to take XYZ to trial? Because we had to call some of the same witnesses, and the defendant has to be here. So I would argue, by doing it this way, they saved Donald Trump a bunch of grief and hassle because you're in New York on Monday in your criminal trial. Oh, I got to fly down to Georgia on Wednesday for my other criminal trial. Mm-hmm. So if anything, they were making life easy. Now, the federal stuff, that's in the hands of the Supreme Court right now. Does Donald Trump have unlimited immunity to do whatever? No, he doesn't. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, when he says Joe Biden's Justice Department was ready to shoot me and kill me, couldn't he do that if he had immunity to do whatever he wanted?
Yeah, I think that not only January 6th being what it was, trying to delay the peaceful transfer of power because he lost, saying that you have total immunity to do whatever you want as president, that is the most disqualifying statement I've ever heard anybody make who's running for a political
office. The last time we heard that was like, 1775? July 3rd, 1776?
1972, I believe.
Yeah.
Didn't Nixon try to say that? If I do it, if the president does it, it's not illegal?
Yep. If the president does it, it's not. If the president does it, it's not a crime.
But the reasons for the delay, too, you got to remember, is that when Alvin Bragg, when they indicted him, was over a year ago. That case could have been gone and into trial in 4 months. It didn't have to be this year. He delayed it, and he put the other cases in there, and he delayed those, and he's got Cannon going down in Florida going crazy and delaying down there.
Yeah, you could argue that Alicia Cannon in, the documents case, or is that the Jan 6 case?
Documents.
Which is the most slam dunk case, the most physical evidence.
And there's a clock for the speedy trial clock. Okay, you have so much time if you claim that you want speedy trial, and they keep a clock on you on that. And no time has been gone off. It's been over a year. Since he's been indicted. And when he was indicted, the prosecutors gave him 90% of the discovery that day. and we still haven't got past all the pre-motion trials. And
Well,
everything
he's
else.
in what it looks like is he's delaying the federal pieces in case he wins, then he can pardon himself.
Mm-hmm.
He can't pardon himself in these two state
Nope.
cases, correct?
Nope.
Or the civil stuff.
Only the governor can issue pardons.
All right. And there are some people saying Kathy Hochul should pardon Trump in this.
I've heard there was a
It was the guy that the Democrat that
it was
Democrat that ran.
Northwest. I can't remember somewhere.
who's the Democrat that challenged Joe Biden this year? See, nobody knows.
No one can.
It was
I can't remember.
Dean something. Dean Phillips, maybe?
Yeah.
He said that Hochul should pardon Trump for the good of the country, just to take this off the table and move on.
Yeah, so they won't because
So you can do it again?
because they're saying he's making all this money and he's getting all the support because it was such a railroad job, blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
And I did find something, and I wanted to go into that.
All right, you're going to have to calm down. I want to talk to Abdul. You're
know.
just too excited. My God.
I just want to get his opinion on this at some point.
Okay,
so.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, so there was a case in New York. It was a falsifying records case. The person was indicted for insurance fraud in the fifth degree and then falsifying business records in the first degree. He was acquitted of the insurance fraud. He was found guilty of the falsifying the records. And it states in here when they tried to appeal it and got denied, that although the jury acquitted defendant of insurance fraud, which is the crime the people alleged the defendant intended to commit or conceal by falsifying business records, the jury could convict the defendant of falsifying business records if the jury concluded the defendant had intended to commit or conceal another crime, even if he was not convicted of the other crime. So they allowed that to go through on appeal, even though the underlying crime he was acquitted of.
Welcome to New York.
Yeah, so the appeal, I think all the Trump people are like, oh, he's going to win the appeal. How does the appeal process work? Let's actually go to not the signing statement, but the jury instructions. What are jury instructions, and what was different about this that the Ben Shapiro's of the world have seized on?
The thing about jury instructions, I would argue, are technically the most tedious, boring, yet most important part of a trial.
Okay.
I really believe so, because the instructions are going to be here's what the jury has to decide, yes or no, and whether your client is guilty or not guilty, or civilly liable, or they get off scot-free. Mm-hmm. And they're what both sides can come up with jury instructions, or they're pattern jury instructions for different types of cases. It's got the big book of jury instructions.
Okay.
is what it is. Right. And then they both submit to the judge, or the judge can write his own jury instructions. But I will say this about Judge Marchand. As much as people give him grief, Judge Marchand went out of his way to make sure Donald Trump got treated more than fairly. Because trust me, if we violated 10 gag orders, we'd have been in jail.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we violated 3 gag orders.
Right.
We'd have been in jail. Donald Trump violated 10 gag orders and didn't go to jail.
Right.
Come on.
Because he kept saying things about the judge, about people who are
he said
witnesses.
Judge Marchand, you can say things about me, you can say things about the prosecution, that's fine, whatever. But you can't attack our families, you can't attack the jury. That you can't do, or make threats.
And he did 10 of those.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and he didn't go to jail. So anybody who says this was a rigged trial and a witch hunt, I mean, that's a point of unfairness.
Well, sometimes you actually do find a witch.
Right. Yeah, so
Who put this nose on it? I did.
You can leave a comment and we will answer your question. But Ron here has a question. It says, I'm not a Trump or Biden fan, but why the heck does everyone hate Trump to the point of prosecution, but no other politician is subject to the same, even though they
Bob
lie?
Menendez.
I'll put Clinton there.
Bob Menendez.
Yeah, his trial's going on right now.
The second one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
New Jersey.
Who's the former governor of Virginia? Bob McDonald.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of former governors from Virginia that
This is very similar to what John Edwards went to trial for.
Yeah, he was acquitted, but he did go to trial for that.
Yeah. He got
acquitted because he said that he was doing the payment to hide it from his wife. Trump couldn't use that defense because he didn't care.
He didn't care. Yeah. If you look at John Edwards, Ron, very similar. He was doing it to protect his family, not in falsifying business records. I saw someone make the argument that, look, we let a lot of this stuff slide. Why are we just not looking the other way? Prosecutors have discretion all the time. This costs them a ton of money. It causes a huge circus. There are actual rape cases that aren't going solved in New York City. Why go after this? Why should Bragg even care?
Well, because first of all, what people don't understand is, yes, prosecutors do have discretion. And it's one thing to run a stop sign. You just don't do it again.
Right.
It's another thing to run a stop sign, hit somebody, and then take off.
Yeah.
So it depends on the seriousness of the crime. But like I said, had Donald Trump just plea bargained and said, okay, these are misdemeanors, pay a fine, go away, we're good.
So
but
his choice to fight this is going to make this worse for him in the end.
we always tell clients, now we can settle this and walk away, or you can fight it, but if you fight it, here's what the consequences could be. As long as you're willing to accept that, then we'll go fight for you.
So I saw that he was willing to go to jail. He said in a Fox News interview, I think, that he was willing to go to jail and ready, and hoped that he went to jail. It seems to me there's a little bit of milking this, right? Moving that interview to the day before the convention. He raised $50-some million, and I got this ridiculous email from his campaign. Witch hunt. So support our fight against the witch hunt 17 times. Just, this is all rigged, blah, 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 blah. I don't know that I buy the argument that this is going to get him reelected. I could see it in one way. When you look at the 2016 election, the media, the earned media that he got was like worth $200 million or some ridiculous amount, and that's what helped propel him over Hillary, is because he was such a novelty, the news couldn't stop reporting on him. This time, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that again. And then every block on my DirecTV is Trump trial, Trump trial, Trump trial, right? Maybe it has that effect of reminding people of Trump and drowning out Joe Biden.
That's because the media and Trump have this unholy relationship.
Yes.
They need each other.
Yeah, it's like that Sam Smith song.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would also say it has the power to remind the people who actually matter in this election, the independents, the swing voters, of, God, I don't want to go through that again. I'm so done with his drama.
In a tie election where Joe Biden and Donald Trump are basically 40, 45 apiece.
Yeah.
You got those 10% in the middle, and this election will be won or lost in the margins.
Yeah.
And if you're a person who hasn't made up your mind yet about Donald Trump or Joe Biden, you may not like Joe Biden, but you certainly aren't going to vote for Donald Trump. If you're more likely an independent voter. Because I want to say, I saw some polling data recently that said like 52, 56% of independents say they would not vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah. People just don't want the drama again. It was enough drama already. But then you go out to eat, and it's $75 for you and your family of 3, and you're like, maybe Donald Trump I don't care if he's in jail while he's president. I've been arguing for presidents to go to jail for 10 years.
A lot of the reason why the inflation went up was because of stuff that Donald Trump did.
Oh, yeah, but you can't argue that to a Trump person.
And
you can't argue that to a right-wing person.
He was also the one that went out and got gas prices raised.
Yeah. It's the greatest con in history.
I love the line that when Donald Trump was president, gas prices were only $2. Yeah, that's because nobody was driving because we're in a COVID pandemic. You moron.
Well, you passed 2 stimulus bills, write the third, get mad at Nancy Pelosi because it wasn't big enough. You give everybody money. You put Fauci in charge of the response. You created the inflation, and then you acted like a fool and lost an easy election to a guy that
it reminds me of the kid who murdered his parents and asked for mercy on the court because he was an orphan.
Yes. I really got him. He's the worst president ever. Don't remember anything I did. It's just unbelievable to me.
I just want to see how you run for president from a jail cell. That's all I want to see. Or under house arrest.
It's been about 100 years since that happened, hasn't it?
Yep. Actually, the last person to run for president from jail was a guy from Indiana.
Eugene Debs?
Yep. Because I'm working on getting a hold of Indiana State University, which is in Terre Haute, where Eugene Debs' home is.
Yeah.
To see if somebody's ever done some research on him and tell that story.
Yeah.
My grandfather was named after him.
I'm not going to burst your bubble, but Adam Wren just wrote that in Politico.
I know.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So Eugene Debs is somebody that I was really inspired by because he was the biggest third party 100 years ago. And so when I was executive director of the Libertarian Party, I studied him a lot. And when you look at their platform 100 years later, Obama was implementing a lot of what because they had moved the country so far. But how did he do it? What mechanisms did he build? And going to prison over the Espionage Act was a huge piece of his likability to the electorate. So really fascinating person. It's good you're doing that because he's somebody to look into. So let's go back to the appeals. How does the appeals process? I read somewhere that Republicans think he's going to get this appeal because of the jury instructions and these are all wacky. And I still don't understand what are Republicans specifically objecting to in the jury instructions?
Because first of all, to file an appeal, you have to argue not only was there trial error, but it was more than what's called harmless error. In other words, the error that was committed by the court had to affect the outcome of the case.
Okay.
And first of all, and then, by the way, prosecutors, if Donald Trump was found not guilty, it would be done and over with, because the prosecution can't go back and appeal again, because that's double jeopardy and a bunch of other crap. So that's point number one. And point number two, there's no guarantee that the appellate court will take it. That's number two, because they will say, no, we're good, we're fine. If they do decide to take it, then there's what's called a briefing schedule. Okay, put your briefs together. You got till XYZ day to put together your appellate briefs. And then if the appellate court wants to hear oral arguments, they'll schedule it. But 9 out of 10 times, your arguments are made. Most cases are won or lost on the briefs. The oral arguments are just ice on the cake. The judge may have a question or two, and even then, a judge could ask you tough questions, but that doesn't mean they're going to rule against you. They could be like, hey, I'm on your side. I want to make sure that you have your arguments straight.
So the likelihood of Donald Trump getting an appeal on an appellate court of appointed Democrats.
But here's the thing, though.
What do you think?
Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter.
Why?
It doesn't matter what the judge's affiliation, because the judge has been taking an oath to uphold and defend the law and the Constitution.
Let me change this so people can see my face.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news here. Now,
you're going to tell me
that
the judicial system is non-biased.
I'm not saying the judicial is non-biased. I'm saying the judicial, for the most part, is fair. Because I can have an opinion, and that's perfectly fine, because we don't leave our opinions at the door. However, we still have to follow the law. Now, you can have a conservative interpretation of the law. The words are what they are. You have a more progressive interpretation. To me, that is more of how would define a judge. Is a more conservative judge or is a more progressive judge, not Republican or Democrat. Because I argue a Republican from New York is like a Democrat from Montana.
Yeah, no, when we do these stories on judicial stuff, it's never, you do Supreme Court shows, it's never what matches Twitter and the left-right debates. It's always process or procedure or
and by the way, and here's
code or something.
Most appellate court decisions are usually, Supreme Court decisions are like 7-2, 8-1, 9-0.
Right.
The 5-4s are actually a lot more rare than people think.
Yeah. Do you think that he'll win an appeal, or is this just stand and he has 34 felonies?
I don't think it stands, because I don't see where they are. Like I said, maybe on the documents and using the federal offense as backup, but that's about it.
He's a convicted felon at that point. What happens after that?
He can't own a gun.
But does he go to jail? Do you think the judge will put him in jail?
I would not be surprised if Donald Trump had to spend a couple nights in jail.
Really?
Yeah. Or at least at the very least under house arrest.
Because he can face up to what, 4 years for all
4
these
years for each offense.
For each offense.
Each offense. Yeah. Okay. So he could face serious jail time, but
usually you serve all those sentences concurrently.
Okay. I heard they take contrition into account, and his 10 outbursts and all of these different things factor into the sentencing, and Alvin Bragg politically has to come out and say he needs the maximum, throw the book at him, make an example of him. And so the judge may not want to do that, but...
See, here's the thing. The other thing in criminal matters is when it comes to sentencing, both sides will submit their recommendations for sentencing if the defendant is found guilty.
Okay.
Obviously, the prosecutor is going to ask for as much time as they possibly can. The defense is going to say, hey, how about just probation and house arrest and stay off of Twitter? If you kick Donald Trump off of Twitter, that would hurt him more.
Yeah.
Than anything.
He disappeared there for a long time.
Yeah. Because his lawyer told him to shut up. You're getting us in trouble. That's what you're doing. You're costing us money.
Yeah.
Idiot. I was going to say asshole. Can you say asshole?
Yeah, you can curse here.
I'll say asshole. Okay. Well,
within reason.
Yeah, within reason. Yeah. Yeah. So both will submit their reports. Then the judge will make his recommendation, and that'll be it.
Okay. I can't imagine he goes to jail for any serious length of time. What about you, Rhinehold?
I don't think you would get a long-term jail sentence. I would probably see like in 90 days and then a probation for 3 years. Maybe.
Have an orange jumpsuit to match the orange skin and the orange hair.
At the high end.
Yeah. So if he's on probation or house arrest or home detention or whatever, is he just confined to Mar-a-Lago for the rest of the campaign season?
If they confine to Mar-a-Lago.
Okay. So they could say Bedminster or his New York apartment or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. And they could just give him probation too, which then if he travels, he has to keep checking in with this probation officer on all the travel. So they would have to have a probation officer basically on their travel team, knowing where he's going to be.
Just imagine the Donald Trump ankle bracelet.
Yeah, we had a meme to that effect. I guess what I can't wrap my head around is I just watched the Martha Stewart documentary, which both hosts of The Apprentice are felons now. I'm so used to rich people being treated differently that I can't and I'm around a lot of them. I just can't imagine like Donald Trump calling his probation officer and acting like a regular person, because he's the most irregular person I think that I've ever seen.
Yeah, but a lot of criminals are regular people. That's why they're criminals.
I guess that's a point. Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
I was in court today for East Paul Hatches, the Center Township constable who's gotten in trouble over a bunch of stuff. And it was interesting just watching all the guys come through. The judge had to tell one person, hey, pull your pants up. Take your hat off.
Right.
Why'd you come to court in a t-shirt and blue jeans?
No adherence to the norms of society.
Right, which is why you're here in the first place.
Right. Yeah, I think as a parent, like that's something I've really focused on the last 5 years, because you have to teach the rules of society, because if you want them to get to the position you're in and further, you have to be good at networking, you have to be good at working with other people, you have to be kind, you have to have these values. Donald Trump displays none of those, which is, I think, to your point of nobody's told him no. Who's the last person to tell Donald Trump no?
Probably his wife.
And so he goes out and hires Stormy. But that's, I think, and we can talk about the right now, because I think you guys have done a great job of explaining what happened and why it is this way. Because I guess really what you're saying is you can cry that this is a witch hunt all you want if you're a Trump supporter, and you can look at this as a vendetta. But once you get the indictment, which is what his mentor, the mob lawyer, always told him, just don't get the indictment. Because once you get into that process, you're in their hands and they control you, and you can't get out of that system. Which happens to a lot of young men, too. This is no longer a political process. This is all a legal process. And it's so much different than the talk radio world.
There's a legal process, there's a legal world, and there's a political world. And Donald Trump has been going back and forth. And I think sometimes he forgets which world he's in. Because he'll do things in court. No, you don't. Sit down. What are you doing?
Yeah.
No, don't close your eyes. Don't sit there and look disinterested. Hold your head up and shut up.
Right.
And do what I tell you to do. But in the political world, Donald Trump is the boss. And he can do whatever he wants. Okay, that's fine. You can do it in the political world.
He was the president, for God's sake.
Yeah, but here, we're in court. And then the court's a whole different rules, and you're playing a whole different ball game.
Does that just blow your mind that like a president is sitting in like a low-level court on some misdemeanors?
I see more of it myself.
I know. It made me a little, never mind. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have actual court experience. I've never been in court. But to me, just the idea of a president sitting there being told to open your eyes, you're in court, you're not in charge here, is such a funny, weird thing.
And also, other presidents have been in court before, too. Bill Clinton's been in court for, deposition stuff. I want to say either Mitch Daniels or Eric Holcomb did a deposition on the whole computer IBM thing a few years ago, whatever that was. So it is not uncommon for a president to run contrary to the legal system. This is why a president has good lawyers to keep him out of trouble.
Yeah.
And it's one thing when Donald Trump says, I could have made it, they can go after anybody now. You could make a mistake and get in trouble. No, you have to have intent to defraud and commit a crime.
Yeah.
A mistake is when you don't wear your seatbelt. Not when you file false documents to hide that you had an affair with a porn star.
Raid the White House and take all the classified documents with you.
Oops. I can't believe I did it.
I think so. That, again, goes back to the right, because you and I started working together in 2004 at a talk radio station. You've been in talk radio longer than I, but we've been around it for a long time. You work at a local talk radio station. Donald Trump talks like every caller I ever screened for you back at WXNT. And it seems like talk radio has completely taken over the Republican Party. And it really controls the thought. There is no National Review. The Bulwark doesn't exist. Dispatch isn't widely read. There's no intellectual mooring to it anymore. It's just like a mood, how I feel today. And I feel like Donald Trump's not guilty.
Sounds like the left, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Expand on that.
Well, at the end of the day, what was it I said? It's like an old college protest. People protesting on the quad.
Yeah.
Eventually, the far left, they go so far that they end up right back in the same spot. Put your signs down and walk across the street and pick up the other protests.
Yeah.
Pick up the other protest signs. And this thing, and I understand the psychology of the Donald Trump supporter, because Donald Trump has basically personalized their politics. When he says, if they're going after me today, next they're going after you. If you're falsifying government documents to hide an affair with a porn star, you committed a crime. So yes, they're going to go after
his Wednesday is unlike any. That would be the craziest thing that ever happened in my life. Like just pick a Wednesday for Donald Trump, and it'd be the craziest day of my life.
And
he's not like me in any way, shape, or form, or you.
And the other thing too to keep in mind, which is why a lot of Republican politicians have become so almost cultist sycophants, is they're afraid of the Trump supporters.
Yeah,
that's what they're afraid of. If I say something bad about Donald Trump, then I'll get a primary challenge, and this primary person will beat me. So I better say something nice about Donald Trump. I'll say this is a witch hunt. I want to say, who was it? The governor of Maryland or U.S. Senator from Maryland said we should respect the process. You could have swore he said, no, there's no Santa Claus.
Larry Hogan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and his campaign ended like the next day.
Yeah.
Now, he's always on MSNBC poo-pooing Trump, but what effect on local politics? One of the concerns that I have about all this is here in Indianapolis, we have a pretty good ecosystem of people that don't put party first. They put the public first. They try to say, all right, what's going to make Indianapolis and Indiana a better place to live? There's a lot of cooperation amongst non-government organizations and government organizations, and you could call it the elite and the cabal, but it's really everybody looks at it as a partnership to grow jobs, grow the economy, and get everybody moving in the right direction. That gets threatened when you start electing a Mike Braun, a guy who doesn't really have any interest in any of those conversations of how to move things forward. He's just there because it's a vanity project, and he's got the Donald Trump endorsement. And you start electing Jim Banks, who is a very reasonable person, but is very unreasonable on Fox News, because that's what it will take to get himself elected. I'm seeing creeping into Indiana that Trumpian politics. I just watched the Libertarian Party die because of that mentality. How much longer do you think the Trumpian politics burns itself out over the next 5 years, and local and state governments can get away with being normal and doing some of the sidewalks and fire management and all that? Or does this just burn itself all the way down to city councils and county councils?
Let me ask you this. Whatever happened to the Tea Party?
Morphed into Trumpism.
And this will morph into something else.
Yeah.
Not nature like my ex-girlfriend hates a vacuum.
Very nice. You're going to get canceled with that kind of talk.
Yeah, I know.
Even Charles Barkley. Why don't you buy a wife a watch?
Feel free. That means I have one less job I have to worry about. Great.
Yeah, but on the local level, you're so much closer to it. Are my concerns about...
You'll have some elected...
Personal politics.
You'll have some elected officials say, hey, this is a witch hunt. They'll make their statement, then they'll move on. Because the attention span around these days, like... It used to be the length of a music video, which is 3 minutes and 35 seconds.
Sure.
Now it's more like 30 seconds.
3.
Yeah, now they're going to the next thing.
Yeah. So you think that kind of cooperation at the local level...
Local issues, what does Donald Trump do with sidewalk repair down to Darn?
But it's an attitude. It's... Here we've got the state senator from the South, who shall not be named, Jim Lucas, who acts this way. Now, didn't he get thrown out or something?
No, he got his committees taken away from him.
Okay.
He won his primary.
He won his primary? Okay.
He lost in Jackson County, but he won all the other surrounding counties in his district.
Yeah. I just see that mentality of cruelty's the point creeping its way, and anti-intellectualism into local politics.
But I'll argue there's always been a certain streak of anti-intellectualism in local politics.
All right, yeah.
Because God knows we can't have people thinking. What's wrong with you? I'll tell you what to think and what to do.
All right, we should start wrapping up. Anything you want to ask, Rhinehold? Anything you want to add?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. All right, predictions for 2024. What do you think Donald Trump wins? Do you think he pulls it out?
Nope. I don't think so. I think it's going to be those 10% of the voters in the middle going to decide this election. And right now, 60% of them are not supporting Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Now, granted, a day in politics is a lifetime. Anything can change between now and then. I mean, Joe Biden could, slip in the shower and fall and hit his head. Here's my thing. I think it's a sad state of affairs when the two main choices for president are a guy who stole government documents and a guy who can't remember where he put them.
But 2020 was very similar, right? The increasing decrepitude, the pace with which they're deteriorating is scary. But the guy who was in the headlines started losing. And so Joe Biden just went into his basement and said, "You can have it, Donald. No worries." And I think the trials and everything is going to work against Donald Trump. I don't think it's going to help like his supporters think.
The thing was is that 2020 and probably 2024 is not an election that has anything to do with Biden. It is either you want Trump back in there or you don't want him back in there.
I'd agree with that.
And by the way, this will be his third time running for president.
Exhausting. We've been dealing with this for 10 years.
He's won one election in his life.
Yeah.
And theoretically, he split the difference. He won the Electoral College out the popular vote.
The greatest, he doesn't even have to do anything. Donald Trump's greatest asset, greatest mailer or yard sign is at the grocery store. It's the economy versus Donald Trump's behavior. That's really what the election comes down to. All right. Plug, please. Shameless self-promotion.
Shameless self-promotion. You can follow me. My main website is indiepolitics.org. You can follow me on Twitter at ATTYAbdul or indiepolitics.org. I'm on Facebook. I got a bunch of Facebook pages. And also, if you go to indiepolitics.org, you can get a cheat sheet subscription for $100 a year. And a new cheat sheet will be out this weekend.
It's worth every penny.
Yes, and then some.
Yes. All right. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Chris Spangle Show. Thank you, Abdul, for being here. Thank you, Rhinehold, for coming all the way down here and participating. And thank you, listener, for joining us here on the Chris Spangle Show. If you liked this, if you learned something, if you go, wow, I actually understand this a little bit better, and people weren't just screaming the entire time, then share this with your friends. That's the best way to help the creators that you like grow. People like Abdul, people like myself, and Rhinehold. Once he starts, you'll get that podcast out. You'll get that podcast out there one day. I believe it. Mark Warner said he learned nothing.
That's because Mark Warner isn't capable of learning anything.
Rhinos can't learn. All right. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Chris Spangle Show.